Hey there folks, welcome back for Module 1 of the Microsoft MD-100 course, which is also known as the Windows Client course. Just in case you're new to my channel or didn't watch the intro video to this course used to actually be called the Windows 10 course up until not so long ago. And now since the beginning of 2022, it has been renamed by Microsoft to the Windows Client course. The reason why it has been renamed is because Microsoft has now included Windows 11 in this course. It's not just about Windows 10 anymore. So if we're going to go and call it Windows 10 and it has Windows 11 in it, that's just going to be silly, right? Alrighty, let's get to the agenda for this specific module. Please note though that what I'm about to list is simply the main sections and not all the topics discussed in this module. If you want a more accurate list of the topics discussed in this video, you can of course find that in the video description down below. You might still not have everything in that list, but it's still going to be way more accurate than this list. Alright, so the first main topic, or section should I say, in Module 1 is introducing the Windows client. The second section in this module is going to be about Windows client additions and requirements. The third section will be about installation methods. The fourth is upgrading and migrating Windows clients. And then our fifth and last section in this module is deployment methods. Now, in case anyone's wondering, no, installation methods and deployment methods is not the same thing. They are two different things, which you'll see once we get to those sections. Now, folks, before we jump into the first section, just a quick little selfless promotion. If you haven't given this video a like yet, please do so. It really helps get this free content out there to more people. The more you like it, the more YouTube pushes it out to people who might actually need it. And then also, if you'd like to know when the next module gets released, by the way, remember to also hit that subscribe button, otherwise, well, you might miss it. Okay then, now that we have that out of the way, let's dive right into the first section which we had on our list, which was of course introducing the Windows client. Now in this section, we're going to be looking at the subcategory or topic which is also called overview of the Windows client, just to give us a basic taste of what it's all about. So the first thing is multiple form factors and hardware. So whether we're talking about Windows 10 or Windows 11, they both come in multiple form factors. It's not limited to your traditional desktop PC like you would have seen 10 or 15 or 20 years ago. These days, Windows 10, Windows 11 could be on any device pretty much. It can be on a phone, a tablet, and then of course a laptop or a desktop, which you would expect. The hardware is also not as limited as it was back in the day. It can run on just about anything. So there's very lightweight versions of Windows 10 and Windows 11 is what we're saying. You've got seamless transition for users of multiple devices. So you can actually switch very quickly and very easily between your different devices. The average person these days has about 2-3 devices, they say. And it's very easy for you to go and have your content on one device and just quickly swap over to another device and actually have access to the same content. Whether this is in a work environment, whether this is in a home environment, either way, potato, potato, you've got access to your content anywhere, anytime. And then we also have focus on cloud service integration. So from Windows 10, Windows 10 was actually designed to integrate with the cloud because that was pretty much when the cloud started booming. Everybody started using the cloud, and Microsoft basically went and released an operating system that allows you to go and tap into that benefit. So if you go look at other things like OneDrive, OneDrive has been around for a long time, but you had to go access it via other means. Now on Windows 10, if you were to go into your Explorer, you would notice there's a OneDrive folder. So if you have a personal OneDrive account or a company one, you have the ability to go and link it there and you can access your information. And you can of course link that OneDrive account on multiple devices and have access to the same information on these multiple devices. It doesn't stop there though. A Windows 10 operating system, assuming you're running professional enterprise, has the ability to go and join a cloud domain. Some might call it an Azure Active Directory domain. So this is only available on Windows 10 onwards and only on professional or enterprise. Same goes for a normal domain, quite frankly. So this cloud domain obviously comes with many benefits, and you have all of these benefits we just mentioned for Windows 10, of course, on Windows 11 and much, much more. Windows 11 now also integrates with all other aspects of your life, never mind just the cloud, because they know the average person is online and the average person has 2 or 3 devices, so they just want to tap into that, of course. Fourthly, we also have enhancements delivered through regular continuous updates. Now, Microsoft makes this sound like a benefit. My personal opinion is it's very annoying. But unfortunately, I've got to give the course like it was intended. So I'm supposed to basically go and brag about this, I suppose. In a manner of speaking, it's a good thing because you're always going to have the latest of the latest and the best of the best. My problem with this is the average user at home that's not in a company environment, especially the folks that doesn't know anything about technology, they're going to receive these updates automatically. And more often than not, you're going to notice that these updates actually tend to cause a lot of shenanigans on your machine. Certain things will cease to work. You can have this error, this compatibility issue, that compatibility issue. And the reason behind that is because some of these updates still need to go and be tested. Microsoft guarantees us that these updates have been tested, tried and tested, and yet we still experience these issues. And if we didn't, I mean, if you think about it, if we didn't, you wouldn't have a job now, would you? So it's probably a good thing in an indirect way, but it's also a bit of an annoyance. Plus, if you, even yourself as an IT person, if you receive these updates and they install in the background and you're none the wiser about that, and let's say something on your machine suddenly stops working, it's a bit of an annoyance because now you're going to go and troubleshoot, and only after half an hour or an hour, you might notice, you know what, boys and girls, it might have been an update. And when you go and investigate, you'll notice that, you know what, there was an update. Now, if you knew there was an update taking place and immediately afterwards something stopped working on your machine, obviously you're going to suspect the update and you're going to go and remove it and you're going to remedy the situation. But if you didn't know about it, it's going to take you so much longer to go and solve that issue, which is why I myself prefer to be in control of my updates. I want to choose which updates I get, when I get them, and how I get them, and also to whom I deploy them and how I deploy them. So yeah, Microsoft likes to make these sound like a benefit, but in most cases it's going to be a bit of a snag. And then we also have another topic here, which is easier to implement updates and upgrades. Yes and no, in my opinion. Up until Windows 8.1, you had the ability, whether you're a technician or not, to go and turn off Windows updates. From Windows 10, if anyone has had the opportunity to go on Windows 10 or Windows 11, you can no longer go and turn off Windows updates. You're going to get them whether you want them or not. Now, if you're in a country where data is expensive or where you've got limited data, maybe you've got like a 2 gig or a 10 gig or 20 gig limit on your internet per month. We call that a capped connection, not an uncapped connection. It's a capped connection. You're going to be very unhappy with the results because now your machine is going to go and download updates willy-nilly and you didn't do anything on the internet yet, and now you want to go and send an email or go and download something, and then presto, your data is done. And you're going to wonder what the cheese is going on here. So there used to be a lot of ways to get around this. You could just go and turn off the Windows Update service, and now more recently it seems like it's turning itself back on for various reasons. One of them being, of course, because it's scheduled in a task schedule to turn itself back on. Very annoying. So another way you can get around this, which is actually ironically suggested by Microsoft, is to go and put your machine on a metered connection, if you know what that is. If you don't know what that is or how to go and do that, don't worry about it. That is going to be covered later in this course in a different module, of course. Not in this module. In this module, we're just introducing the Windows client. But if you go and put your PC on a metered connection, whether it's an Ethernet cable or a Wi-Fi connection you're connecting to, potato, that is one way to prevent your Windows machine from updating willy-nilly whenever it pleases. And when you're good and ready, you can go and turn it off, update, and if you experience any issues, you can just go and remedy them because you would have known it's an update, of course. Okay, folks, so let's go to the next subcategory, which is, of course, what is new in the Windows client. So I'm going to do this twice. I'm first going to do this for Windows 10, more or less, and then I'm going to do it again for Windows 11, more or less. Before we start though, just keep in mind that whatever I've got on my lists here is not the full list. This is just, like I said, more or less. So as we progress through this course and we go more in depth, we're going to obviously cover more and more new features that's unique to Windows 10, unique to Windows 11, or that's maybe available on both of them. All right. So let's start off Windows 10 first. The first thing that's seen as new on Windows 10, at least that's what Microsoft says, is support for multiple device types. So if you go look at operating systems that came out before Windows 10, you would notice that they don't really support all kinds of devices. They are for the most part limited to desktops, laptops, or certain types of devices. Whereas compared to Windows 10, Windows 10 is compatible on pretty much anything. So there's various editions, obviously, but if you use the right edition, you can effectively install Windows 10 on pretty much any device you can think of, which is those multiple form factors we spoke of earlier. Something else that's new on Windows 10 is improved cloud integration. Also, like we said earlier, cloud itself is not something new. If I wanted to go and use something like, let's say, OneDrive, I could have gone and done that on Windows 8, 8.1, or even something earlier than that. It has been around since before Windows 10 came out, but it wasn't built in to the operating system. Now on Windows 10, the operating system was designed to integrate with the cloud. You can go and tie it very easily and very quickly into your OneDrive account, whether it's personal or business. You can very quickly and very easily join it to your cloud domain, of course, assuming you're on professional or enterprise version of Windows 10. We also have new and enhanced recovery tools and options. So you're not exactly losing, access to the old traditional recovery tools if you've ever had the opportunity to go and play with those, but they've given you extra toys to go and play with. So when Windows 10 just came out, there was a tool called Refresh and there was a tool called Reset. Now this has since been changed to just Reset. There is no Refresh anymore. So if you still hear about the Refresh or you still see it somewhere, the resource you're using is probably outdated. So originally, Refresh allowed you to basically do kind of almost like a format on your PC, if you know what that is. It's going to be almost like a format, except it allows you to keep the data on the machine. All the programs that was installed on your Windows 10 machine would be missing. It's basically like a wipe. It's going to wipe your machine. It's going to be as if you just installed Windows 10 for the first time. However, it would keep the data. Where if you were to go and click on the reset option back in the day when Windows 10 just came out, it would be like a format. So you just didn't exactly need a disk or a product key per se. So that was a nice way to get around the disk issue or the product key situation. If you had a client or a user that doesn't know where they place their product key or their DVD for their operating system. So it was a nice way to get around that very quickly and very efficiently. So reset was kind of like a format. Nice way to put your PC back to factory spec and to also maybe possibly get rid of any corrupt issues. If you've got a corrupt file, corrupt operating system, that's one way to get rid of it. So Microsoft has now since changed this. So now there's no refresh option. There's only a reset option. However, if you were to go and click on reset now, and this is something we're going to cover later on in the course, don't worry if you don't know what it looks like. If you're going to go and click on reset, it actually asks you, would you like to keep something? So it's kind of like, embedding refresh and reset all in one option, which makes more sense actually. So it's going to ask you, would you like to keep something? And you can say yes. And it's going to ask you, okay, what would you like to keep? Would you like to keep your files? What would you like to keep? And then there's another option there, of course, that just says, hey, wipe and load everything. So it's going to be like a clean slate. The fourth thing that's new here, at least fourth new on my list, is Client Hyper-V. So Microsoft says Hyper-V is now available for the first time on Windows 10. That's what Microsoft says. I disagree with that. So I'm simply stating it here because it's part of the course, but I disagree with that statement. So I've put it there because it's part of the course. So let it not be said that I did not say it. But I'm telling you guys, the fact of the matter is it did not come out on Windows 10, at least as far as it goes to client operating systems. If you ever had the opportunity to go and check on Windows 8.1, not Windows 8, specifically Windows 8.1. If you go check on Windows 8.1, assuming you're running the right edition of Windows 8.1, you would see that you can actually go and add Hyper-V as a feature. It is there. So the reality of the situation is it actually came out on Windows 8.1 and not Windows 10. But Microsoft says it came out on Windows 10. And there's many things that Microsoft says came out on Windows 10 which actually did not. I disagree with those. And as I find them, I'll point them out to you guys. But let me just give you guys the course like it was intended. So Hyper-V itself is not something new. It's been out a very long time on server. We would normally go and add this as a role on server. If you know what a server is and if you know what a role is. So we would add this as a role on a server, and on the client side, you would add this as a feature. If you don't know what a role is or what a feature is, do not stress. Like I said, we are going to cover each and every one of these topics individually later during the course. Might not be in this video, probably will not be in this module, but we will cover them nonetheless. Now, just to give you an overview, Hyper-V is one of Microsoft's virtualization platforms. It allows you, in a nutshell, to go and create what we call virtual machines. It's exactly like a real computer, but it doesn't have its own resources. It doesn't have its own RAM, doesn't have its own CPU or hard drive, So it's going to share it with the host PC where it's running on. It's basically leeching off the host is what we're saying. More on that once we get to it. Now, something else that's also new in Windows 10 is security enhancements. This really is new, or at least it was new when Windows 10 came out, is you can now go and put a pin on Windows 10. You can go and put a picture password on Windows 10. You can go and use Windows Hello. You can go use facial recognition on Windows 10. Up until before Windows 10, you only had your traditional Windows password. So when you start your Windows, if you were lucky enough to have a password, you would just type that in and there you go. You'd be taken to your desktop on that machine. On Windows 10, you could just have your traditional password if you really want to, but if you want, you can also go and add a picture password. So that means you get to choose any picture on your computer, whether it's built into Windows or not. You can go and download one from Google if you want to. It could be, for example, a picture of a cat. And what's happening now is you get to choose two gestures, two completely random gestures you get to do on that picture. The first gesture could be to go and circle the cat's nose. I'm just using the picture of a cat as an example. It could be any picture. So my first gesture would be to go and circle the cat's nose. After doing so, the gesture disappears. My second gesture would be to go and draw a straight line from the left ear to the nose. That's my second gesture. Once I'm done, it disappears. Now, once you've done your second gesture, it's going to ask you to confirm the two gestures you've just done, kind of like when you need to go and confirm a new password. So I circle the nose again, I draw the straight line from the ear to the nose again, and then I'm done. So the next time I start this PC, never mind asking my traditional password, assuming you still have that, it's going to present you with this picture, and it's going to ask you for your two random gestures, which nobody would know because they're invisible. So you are going to have to go and circle the nose and draw a straight line from the ear to the nose, which was my two gestures, at least in my example it was. And if you don't meet those two gestures, which is invisible, it will not unlock the PC. At least that's the idea. Now, it doesn't matter how much security you add and how many security measures you add, nothing is unhackable. Absolutely anything and everything in life can be hacked. The only reason why we keep adding security to things in life, not just IT, is to basically irritate the perpetrator. You want to annoy them so much and inconvenience them so much so that you discourage the behavior. So we just try to discourage behavior here. So if I'm going to try and break into your PC and I see you've got 3 security measures, whereas the next guy has 1, who am I going to try and break into? It's probably going to be the guys that's easier to break into, of course. So the same thing goes for a car or home security. If you're going to go and put 6 foot or 8 foot high walls, electric fencing on top of that, get yourself some guard dogs, motion sensors, security cameras, maybe some burglar bars, and an alarm system in your home, is that going to keep criminals out of your home? Heck no! If I want to break in and steal your TV, I will break in and steal your TV. You're not going to keep me out. So all you're trying to achieve with all that security is just to irritate me so much or inconvenience me so much so that I'd rather go to your neighbor's house and steal his TV. That's all you want to achieve. So the same goes for IT security. It's never going to keep someone out. You're just making it so much more difficult. So if you have a Windows password, for instance, just your normal password, did you know you can crack that in less than 10 seconds? You can bypass a Windows password in less than 10 seconds if you know your stuff. So that's not going to keep me out. You just want to irritate me. Now, if you're going to go put a picture password, are you going to stop me? No, because now it's going to take me 5 minutes to get into your PC. So if you get up from your PC and you quickly go to the restroom, I might not have enough time to break into your PC because you might be back within 5 minutes. So if you're going to go and add a third measure of security, let's say a PIN. A PIN explains itself. It's a 4 or 5 digit PIN number. If you're going to go and add that as an extra third layer, is that going to keep me out now? No. Instead of 5 minutes, it might now be 30 minutes or 60 minutes because you've got 3 layers of protection. So now, even if you go to the restroom or you go make yourself a quick cup of coffee, that's not going to be enough time for me. I'm going to have to wait at least until you go for lunch or until you go home. And if you're going to add a fourth measure of security, you might find it's going to take me a whole day. Maybe the whole night is not going to be enough. That's all you want to achieve. You want to make it so darn gosh difficult for me to the point where I'm going to give up and just go to the next person. Now, I'm talking too much about security, so there's actually much more security they've added, but more on that once we get to security. Something else that's new in Windows 10 is Windows to Go. It sounds like a takeaway meal because it kind of is like a takeaway meal. You've probably heard or seen someone install Windows from a memory stick. Some people just call it a USB stick or a flash drive. So if you've ever seen that or heard of that, that is installing it from the stick onto the computer's hard drive. Now, Windows to Go is to install it to the stick. Not from the stick, but to the stick. So this gives you the ability to go and put a full-blown operating system like Windows 10 onto a memory stick. And all you need to do is you just jab that into a USB port into a computer of your choice. You boot from USB and you would see your operating system of your desktop, your applications, and your files. More on that later, but there's certain requirements you need to obviously meet. Some of them, for example, is you need to have a USB 3.0. Just goes without saying, it's not going to work on a slow stick. It needs to be at least 3.0 in speed. You need to have a memory stick that's at least 32 gigs in size. Anything smaller would not suffice. I would recommend going bigger than 32 gigs, but the minimum requirement is 32 gigs. This memory stick or stick, whatever you want to go and call it, needs to be Microsoft certified. At least that's what the course says. I can tell you otherwise, any memory stick would actually work. The Microsoft certified flash drives, first of all, cost you 2 or 3 times more than a normal one because they've got the fancy logo on them. And it basically just means that that stick is guaranteed, tried and tested to work with this feature. If you then go use another memory stick, it will work, but it's not guaranteed to work. It's kind of like buying pirate parts for your car. Instead of buying from the manufacturer or the dealership, which is usually the more expensive one, you're going to go buy pirate parts. Does that mean the pirate parts will not work? No, they probably will. In some cases, they might actually even work better and longer than the original parts. You never know. You just don't have that guarantee because it's not from the dealership or the manufacturer. Same thing goes here with Windows. If you're not using the original memory stick that was intended for this, well, you've got no guarantee. It might work, it might not work. It might not work as long. So my suggestion to you guys here would be, if you're going to be using Windows to Go in a regular basis, maybe then get the real memory stick. But if you're going to use it once in a blue moon, once a month, once in 3 months, you know what? Just get yourself a cheap memory stick because who cares? If it doesn't work, it doesn't work, Okay, so that's enough about new features in Windows 10. More on that later. So let's jump into Windows 11. Now, with regards to Windows 11, one of the first things you'll notice that's new is, of course, the start screen. And never mind the start screen, actually the taskbar as well, which is not even on this list of mine. So the start screen looks somewhat different. And if you have ever worked on Windows 10, it will be slightly different to you. If you've not worked on Windows 10 and you only worked on something like Windows 8 or older, then it's going to be a much bigger change to you. And it's going to be a little bit longer for you to adapt to the new changes. If you've worked on Windows 10, the changes should be minor for you. You're going to notice that maybe those live tiles we spoke of, that's going to be missing. They've removed the Windows live tiles that you used to see on Windows 10, and have replaced them with a nice little smooth start screen that's basically quick access. Everything is quick and easy to go and access. You've got widgets now. Anyway, so you've got multiple user interface enhancements now. Whether you'll see them depends on whether you're running this on a machine that's got a graphics card or not, at least a decent graphics card or not. I've seen if you try and run this on a virtual machine, whether it's on premises or in a cloud, it's not going to look as good as it's supposed to because it doesn't give you all that fancy graphics, which is transparent and all that. Nope. It's going to kind of sort of look like a Windows 95 or Windows 98, if one of you guys have ever seen that. It doesn't look so nice. Cosmetics-wise, it doesn't look as nice if your graphics card is not set up properly, unfortunately. But menus-wise, in the sense of accessing what it is you need, once you get used to it, which is not going to take very long, it's going to be very easy for you to use. And if you've ever gotten yourself a brand new phone, yes, it takes you some time to learn it, but it doesn't take you that long. Now, moving from Windows 10 to 11 or one of the previous operating systems to Windows 11 is probably going to be quicker and easier than getting yourself a new phone. Honest to God, it is. You've got these snap layouts and snap groups, all of which you'll see once we jump into the course itself. They've got a lot of widgets, which they brag about. I quite frankly don't like the widgets, but they've got a lot of widgets in Windows 11. And then, of course, you've got the new Microsoft Store. The Microsoft Store itself is not something new. That's something that you've had since Windows 8.1. Microsoft says it came out on Windows 10, mind you. That's another thing they said it came out on Windows 10. And it did not. If you go check Windows 8.1, once again, you'll see the little shopping bag icon in the taskbar. You still have that on Windows 11. It's just way more advanced, with way more capability. You've got way more things that you've got access to. Okay, so with that mouthful, let's take a bit of a look at something else. Benefits of Windows, now specifically for small and medium-sized businesses. If you are a huge enterprise, then, well, you can ignore some of the stuff that I'm about to say. So for small and medium-sized companies, it's very easy to use Windows. Well, Windows 10 and Windows 11, of course. You've got continuous updates. Yeah, I suppose that's a benefit, but it's also a con in some cases, a drawback, as some of you guys might say. A lot of these small to medium-sized companies do not have an environment or a situation where they can go and test these updates before they actually deploy them. Normally, a rule of thumb in IT would be to always go and test updates before you deploy them to your production environment. So whatever update you get, you normally go and download them somewhere else onto a server of some kind. You test them, maybe on a small group of people or a small group of PCs or devices. And if you're happy with the results, then and only then do you go and deploy it to the rest of the company. Small and medium-sized companies, unfortunately, do not always have that luxury. So, but they say it's a benefit. Another benefit is improved device management. So we're not saying we couldn't do that in the past. We're simply stating that it's easier and there's more ways for us to go and do this. Now, I'm unfortunately limited to giving you guys Microsoft examples and Microsoft tools in this course. Microsoft's very fussy like that, kind of like my wife. Microsoft doesn't like it when I talk about products from other vendors or softwares from other vendors or anything, or even just mentioning other vendors. Unless Microsoft specifically mentions it in the course, I will not mention it because, well, they just don't like that. I suppose I can do what I want because at the end of the day, this is my channel and it's my video. So, heck, why not? I suppose I could just give you guys examples. So when it comes to managing your devices, there's many ways you can go and do it. And very popular ways to go and do it is ironically some Microsoft examples like Intune. It's a cloud platform Microsoft, which was originally designed to manage phones and tablets, but it can be used to manage desktops and laptops as well. You can manage any device, anywhere, anytime using Intune. Sounds kind of scary. Quite frankly, it sounds like hacking. And it would be hacking if it wasn't for the fact that I had to enroll these devices into my Intune environment first before I can manage them. So it's kind of, you can think of it as giving me permission to manage those devices. Another tool you can go and make use of is SCCM, which is not a tool per se. It's actually a suite of tools. It consists of about 6 or 7 tools, each very powerful, very sophisticated, very advanced, and well, a little expensive too, actually. And they are very, very good at managing devices. You can do just about anything on your devices, provided that they're on premises in most cases. If you really wanted to reach your devices of that kind of power, you can actually just combine SCCM with something called Intune, and yes, you can. And that's going to give you the reach of Intune and the back power of SCCM. We also have distribution of apps by using the Microsoft Store for business. We already have a fair understanding of what the Microsoft Store is, but did you know you can actually go and use this to distribute your own applications? Not just applications that you bought on the Windows Store. So if you have Microsoft Store for Business, you can basically use this as a dumping ground. I kid you not. So if you have your own in-house applications that you already have, or you've got a developer that's actively developing them for you, you can go into the Store for Business and you'll have your own little dedicated section, if we want to call it something. And you can go and, let's say, dump your applications there. Let's just call it dumping. You dump it there. And when your users are not in the office, they can log into the Microsoft Store, which is an online platform, remember. They can log into that from anywhere in the world. So they can be in a different country and they can log into the Microsoft Store with their company account and it's going to see, oh, you are from company X. Therefore, here is your dumping ground for your company. And your users or your staff will have access to all the software nonsense that you basically went and uploaded to that little section which is dedicated to your company. Pretty nifty, right? And then, of course, another benefit is the fact that Windows 10 and Windows 11 especially is way more secure than your traditional Windows operating systems. I'm not comparing Windows to other operating systems or other brands. I'm simply comparing it to previous versions of Windows. So Windows 10, you cannot even begin to compare it in security compared to previous versions previous to Windows 10. And if you were to compare Windows 10 to Windows 11, once again, cannot even begin to compare the two. For example, to run Windows 11, one of the requirements is you need to have a TPM chip. It stands for Trusted Platform Module. It's an actual chip on the motherboard that does encryption. Now, the chip itself is not something new, but traditionally we only use this to encrypt things using something like BitLocker in most cases. Now it's a requirement just to be able to run Windows 11. So that tells us that Windows 11 is honest to God a lot more secure than Windows 10. The fact that you need a TPM chip to just run the dang operating system. How about that, right? Okay, folks, let's move on over to that second section we had on that agenda list earlier, which is Windows Client Editions and Requirements. Now, within this section, I'm going to start you folks off with a general list of the various types of operating system editions you get, and of course, their purposes, well, more or less at least anyway. If you look at the top of this list, we have Home Edition. This is pretty much one of the cheapest editions of Windows you can buy, and also pretty much one of the ones with the least amount of features and functionality. This is not always a bad thing though. You basically just need to go and ask yourself, what are you going to use this operating system for? If you're going to, for example, just use it for playing games at home and some minor office work, then Home Edition might actually be perfect for you if you think about it. I mean, sure, the more expensive editions will give you all kinds of extra features and functions, but do you actually need those? Will you even use them? Probably not, right? So why spend all that extra money then get features and functions you won't actually use? Kind of seems pointless. Unless you just want to show off, then it's a whole different game. Now, going down this list in front of us to the Pro edition of Windows, this is obviously a much more expensive version, but in turn, you'll also get much more features and functions. This is obviously more aimed at companies and enterprises and not really for home use. Well, depending on the situation, of course. Well, not unless you need certain features and functions at home. I myself, for example, run Pro and Enterprise editions of Windows on my home PC, but with good reason, of course. I need those editions to do my work. And I also need those to do other random stuff, like my YouTube videos, which you folks, of course, watch. Without Enterprise and Pro editions, I won't be able to do things, for example, like run client Hyper-V, which we mentioned earlier. Without Hyper-V, I can't run virtual machines. And without virtual machines, I can't present and explain a lot of the content in my courses. It's all one giant snowball effect, if you ask me. So all in all, I actually need those editions of Windows to do my work, is what I'm saying. Now, speaking of enterprise, if you look at the enterprise editions of Windows, these are pretty much the editions that give you the most features and functionality. But they're also obviously some of the most expensive versions or editions. You get what you pay for, as the saying goes, alright? The enterprise editions give you benefits like BitLocker, which you can use to do encryption. They also give you client Hyper-V, which we mentioned earlier. They give you the ability to join domains, both on premises, the old school way, and of course in the cloud, the new way. They give you things like application virtualization, which is known as AppV for short. They give you benefits like user experience virtualization, which is known as UE-V for short. And the list goes on and on. Now, the fourth one here on the list being Enterprise LTSC. First of all, the LTSC stands for Long-Term Servicing Channel, in case anyone was scratching their head wondering what the heck those letters stand for. This edition basically is a special edition of Windows that Microsoft will not update with any new features. This edition only gets security and important updates, no other normal updates. You can install this edition on devices that run in a known environment that doesn't change. A common example would be a PC that is used as part of a medical or industrial system. When these environments are typically closed systems designed to a particular specification that will be impacted by traditional updates. So you want to best avoid, installing normal updates on those. Now, looking more down on our list here, we've got Pro Education and Education editions of Windows. These are for the most part the same as your normal Pro and Enterprise editions of Windows. Well, at least with features and all of that. So these are obviously now more aimed at school staff, administrators, teachers, students, and all of those, of course. The last edition here on our list being the IoT. That first of all stands for Internet of Things, in case anyone's scratching their head once again wondering. This edition of Windows is designed for fixed purpose devices. Examples of this would of course be things like an automated teller machine, maybe a point of sale terminal, industrial, medical devices. So if you go to something random like an ATM to go and withdraw money, even though it doesn't look like Windows, that operating system running on an ATM is quite often actually an IoT operating system, Internet of Things. It's a certain version of Windows. So the backend is actually running Windows, even though you might not actually know it. Okay, so when it comes to actually selecting an edition of Windows, the first thing we're going to be looking at is the form factor. Now, we mentioned the form factor earlier, so what kind of device, well, physically speaking anyway, is this for? So you have things like desktops and laptops, which is probably going to be the most common one that you're going to be installing Windows on, at least most of the time. You've got things like your tablets, hybrid devices. It could even be a phone, which is not even mentioned in this list. It could potentially be on an Xbox. Yes, random devices like that. So the Xbox is a device that is most popular for gaming and entertainment, which I'm sure you all know. Now, what you might not know is the HoloLens and the Surface Hub. The HoloLens is one of the first holographic computers. It has many uses for educational purposes, design, and constructing businesses. Pretty cool, right? Sounds like something out of a science fiction movie. The Surface Hub is a large format, touch friendly monitor used in meetings. Fancy, fancy, right? Now, once you've pretty much figured out what kind of form factor you want, let's say it's a laptop or a desktop, something simple we can all relate to, then you need to decide on a function. What are you going to use this for? Is it going to be for a normal everyday end user, someone at the office, someone at home? Is this device going to be used for something like a kiosk, a shop of some kind? Is it going to be a shared device, shared amongst people for whatever reason? So you need to decide on the function of this device. Once you know its function and once you know its form factor, then you can actually start partially making a decision on what edition you want to go and use of Windows. You need to go and look at management and infrastructure requirements. For example, if you would like to go and connect this device to your company domain, then maybe using something like a home edition would not be wise because home edition doesn't allow you to go and join a domain. You might need to go and reconsider and maybe consider using something like professional edition or enterprise edition, which gives you the ability to go and link your machine to a domain. If you are concerned about security and you want to make sure this device has got encryption, once more, you need to make sure you've got something like professional or enterprise because that's going to give you encryption. You'll find that most companies, medium to large size, tend to give their employees enterprise or professional editions in most cases because of the business requirements. And then lastly, of course, capabilities. So that obviously there's going to be a few things that's going to overlap with capabilities and management. I mean, literally, we just mentioned encryption and all that kinds of stuff. We just mentioned the ability to go and join a domain. But maybe, depending on what this person's job is, he or she needs to go and do other nonsense. This could be something random, like in my case, where I need to be able to go and create virtual machines. If your user needs to be able to create virtual machines, such as myself, then you might need to go and consider an operating system that supports that capability. So this is a pretty decent list given by Microsoft that you can go and use to make your final decision, or that at least your IT team can go and use to make the final decision. Oh yeah, guys, and before I forget, yes, I am human. I also forget things. Speaking of making a decision, you and your team will need to decide between 32-bit and 64-bit. I can't believe I'm saying that. Yes, I am. You need to make a decision between those two. Now, for the folks familiar with 32-bit and 64-bit, you would know that pretty much nobody alive uses 32-bit, at least not anymore anyway. So if you've got a decision, I would say just go 64, but please don't be that guy that's going to be using 32-bit. There's nothing good that's going to come out of that. In the old days, 10 years ago, there was very good reasons for using 32-bit, but now there is no good reason for wanting to use 32-bit. There's only going to be drawbacks to it, no benefits. Don't be that guy. Get yourself 64-bit and get it on and over with. So there's only benefits and benefits you're going to be getting from 64-bit. No drawbacks, at least not now anymore. In the old days, maybe. Now, not so much. We've sorted out all those bugs and kinks and stuff. Luckily, most of the newer operating systems are only available in 64-bit. Thank goodness for that. Otherwise, we'd probably have a few people choosing 32-bit thinking it's the better one. Okay, so let's have a bit of a peek at some of the hardware requirements. So on this table in front of us, we've got some of the minimum requirements for Windows 10, and we've got some of the minimum requirements for Windows 11. Now, before we jump into this, I just want to first point out that if anyone's intending on writing the MD-100 exam, what we see in front of us right now is not in the exam. If any of this is going to maybe be in the exam, it might just be that TPM 2.0 requirement of Windows 11. But for the most part, I don't normally see Microsoft asking about these requirements in the exams. At least not in the past. You never know. Microsoft does reserve the right to change any exam at any point in time. They reserve that right to go and do that. You could actually go and read the terms and conditions. But based on past experience, I don't normally see them asking this in exam, so I wouldn't be too concerned. And even if they do, it's not rocket science. It's pretty easy. Now, these are the minimum requirements. It doesn't mean you should go and try and run it on these minimum requirements. You should probably go a little bit higher than this, obviously. Otherwise, you're going to experience massively reduced performance, going to lag, or something's not going to work properly. This is literally the utmost minimum requirements. Now, looking at the left there of Windows 10, things that stands out, of course, is the RAM. They say that you need about 2 gigs there of RAM. I'm actually surprised they say that, because in the previous version of this course, I believe they said 1 gig, if I'm not mistaken. In some cases, even 512 megabytes of RAM, which is just completely nuts. If you're going to try run Windows 10 on 1 gig or 512 megabytes, 512, I don't think it's even going to start. 1 gig, it might start, but that's about it. You're not going to be able to do anything on it. As soon as you launch anything on that machine, well, that's the end of it. Now, hard drive space-wise, they tell us we need 20 gigs for 64-bit. In case you're crazy enough to go run 32-bit, that's 16 gigs. Please bear in mind that that's the bare operating system. That is not with any updates. That's without any drivers. That's without any programs. Absolutely nothing besides the operating system has been installed at that point. So if you've got like a 20 gig hard drive, don't think that you're going to get away with it. You still need to go and install updates and drivers and programs and whatever else you need. So 20 gigs is literally the minimum just to get the operating system up and running. Graphics card wise and display wise, they give us a bunch of nonsense there. If you look at 11 there, Windows 11 that is, you've got minimum of 4 gigs of RAM required. I don't know about that, guys. I'm pretty sure I tried to run this on 2 gigs of RAM the other day, and it ran. I'll just have to go and double check myself. I tried to run it on a virtual machine the other day, and I'm fairly certain I allocated 2 gigs of RAM to it. I'll just have to go and double check myself. And it worked with 2 gigs. I'm pretty sure it did. But whether it did or not is irrelevant. You don't want to go and give it less than 4 gigs anyway, because it's going to be so darn gosh slow. Nobody's going to want to work on that. Hard drive space wise, you need at least 64 gigs is what they say. Obviously, that's once more without the updates and drivers and all that. So you generally want to go higher than that. You'll notice graphics card wise, it needs a higher version of DirectX. And it also, if you look at way at the bottom of the list, you need TPM 2.0. Now, for the folks not familiar with that, TPM stands for Trusted Platform Module. It's an actual physical chip on the motherboard in most cases that does encryption. Now, traditionally, this used to be used in the past, but only for things like BitLocker. Now, it's used for the operating system itself. And you can see they want 2.0, which is pretty much the latest version at this point in time, at the making of this video. So that just tells us how secure Windows 11 is. Not that Windows 10 is not secure, just Windows 11 is obviously way more secure if it needs TPM just to be able to run the darn thing. Amazing, right? If you look at feature-specific requirements, please keep in mind that the features listed there is absolutely not all the features available on Windows 10 or 11. They're just randomly mentioning some things that stands out. If you want to go and make use of, for example, things like Windows Hello, biometric features requires compatible hardware. Biometric being certain aspects about you and your human body. Fingerprints, retinal eye scan, voice recognition, facial recognition. So obviously you need special hardware. This could be something like a fingerprint scanner that you might need. BitLocker requires a password or a TPM chip or a flash drive. I wouldn't say all of those. It depends on how you intend on using it. So you can actually go and use this BitLocker encryption by just using a password. I wouldn't recommend that though. You can go and use BitLocker with a TPM chip, which is probably one of the most secure methods of using it. And you can, of course, go and use a flash drive, which is basically going to act like a smart card. In the old days, we used to use something called a smart card, but nobody uses that anymore. It was too expensive to go and get every user a smart card and a smart card reader. So this has kind of been replaced over the years with something called a USB flash drive. So it's going to kind of simulate a smart card, is what we're saying. Now, client Hyper-V wise, you need a 64-bit operating system. That's especially very important. Now, if you were to go run a 32-bit operating system, just for argument's sake, that's got a lot of drawbacks. One of which is it limits you to 4 gigs, they say. Now, to be more precise, it's about 3.3 gigs. They say 4 gigs. I think they just rounded it off. I don't know why they didn't round it off to 3 gigs. Some say it's 3, some say it's 4, but more accurately, it's actually 3.3, more or less, of gigs of RAM. So you need to be able to give your virtual machines in Hyper-V RAM. Where do they get that RAM? They take it from the host, being your host PC. Your host PC obviously needs an X amount of RAM as well. So let's say it's 2 gigs or 4 gigs of RAM. Now, if you only have 4 gigs of RAM and you need like 2 or 4 gigs of RAM yourself, what RAM are you going to be giving to the virtual machine? You have none. As soon as you give the virtual machine any kind of RAM, even if it's just one virtual machine, your host PC is going to run out of RAM, it's going to crash, and you're going to get a blue screen of death. Some know it as a memory dump or a stop error. Not something you want to encounter. Now, a 64-bit operating system allows you to have way more RAM. Now, you might argue and say, hey, I've got 8 gigs of RAM installed on my motherboard. Just because you've got 8 gigs of RAM installed on your motherboard and you're running 32-bit doesn't mean you have 8 gigs of RAM. You'll see that if you go into your Windows settings, it shows you that you only have 3.3 gigs of RAM usable out of that 8 gig. The rest is inaccessible, is what we're saying. So to be able to access all of your RAM, you need to run a 64-bit operating system. That's one of the main requirements. So you can't run virtual machines unless you've got a lot of RAM, and to be able to use all of your RAM, you need a 64-bit operating system. I see here at the bottom they also once again mentioned BitLocker, but this is BitLocker to go. More on that later once we get to that specific module. It's just a different version of BitLocker, which is now specifically used for devices that's removable, like a memory stick, which they call a flash drive, or of course an external hard drive. Any device that's removable where you're concerned about the sensitivity of the contents of that hard drive, you're going to go and use BitLocker to go because you're going to take it and go. Any device that's internal, like an internal hard drive on your laptop or desktop or server, that's of course going to be the traditional BitLocker that you guys are familiar with. Okay, folks, that is the second section. Let's move on to that third section which we had on our list, which is installation methods. Okay, folks, so with regards to installation methods, let's first have a peek of, well, general overview regarding these installation methods. Let's start with the old traditional methods first. We'll get to modern in just a second. Now, when it comes to the traditional methods, we used to use something called the media. Some of you guys might notice the old CD or DVD method, where you would go and open your laptop or your desktop computer's CD or DVD ROM. You would pop in the DVD or CD and you would wait for it to pop up on the screen, and you would just go and follow the on-screen prompts and just say next, 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 and install Windows, of course. There's now, of course, assuming you have an existing Windows on there. If you don't, you would have to go and boot from CD or DVD-ROM. Not all computers do this by default. You might have to go into the computer's BIOS if you're using an old computer. If you're using one of the newer makes, you might have to go into what's known as the UEFI. So in essence, what we're saying here is you would have to go and configure your booting order on your computer. So that's what's meant by the setup.exe. That's old school method. You can alternatively also go and do something called a wipe and load, which is actually achieved, funny enough, by using the media in most cases. So wipe and load is kind of like a format. Some of you guys just noticed it's a format. You wipe everything on that machine and you just do a clean installation of Windows. So whatever operating system you had on that computer, whether it was the same one, an older one, a newer one, doesn't matter. You're going to go and wipe it. You're going to format the PC and you're going to go and install a brand spanking new copy of Windows on there. So that is one way you can go and install Windows. Now, looking at some of the more modern methods, you can go and do something called an in-place upgrade. Now, for the ones that's familiar with this method, you would probably know that this requires for you to have an existing version of Windows on the machine already. If you don't have an existing operating system on the machine already, you can ignore this specific one because it's not going to work. You need to have an existing operating system on your machine to be able to upgrade to a newer version. If you don't have an existing one, you're going to have to do it like a clean installation, kind of like a wipe and load situation. Now, there's certain criteria that you need to meet, certain prerequisites and requirements before you can go do an in-place upgrade. That is, of course, going to be discussed in its own specific module, but just to give you an overview, you need to be in the same architecture. So if you're running 32-bit version of Windows, you can only upgrade to another 32-bit. If you're running 64-bit, you can only upgrade to another 64-bit of Windows. You cannot upgrade from 32-bit to 64-bit and vice versa. You generally need to stay in the same path as well, edition-wise. So if you're running home, you can only upgrade to another home. If you're running professional, you can generally only upgrade to another professional version. You cannot swap from home to pro and pro to home. At least in most cases, you cannot. You can also go and do a reconfiguration. Now, I don't see this happening a lot, but it does happen. It's more in a company environment. So I think a situation where you guys might see this happening is when a company buys computers. Some of these computers sometimes come with an operating system pre-installed, let's say Windows 10 or Windows 11. And instead of, wiping that PC and installing a new operating system and all that, which is, I wouldn't say it's impossible, it's just a lot of work, they take the existing operating system and just, well, tweak it and reconfigure it, just adjust it to meet the company's needs. Maybe install some features and all kinds of things that you might need to be able to do what it is to do your work. So that's reconfiguring. That's an example of it. It's not the only example. You can also go and do something called provisioning, which is installing Windows. Well, I suppose it's going to kind of at first glance look like the old school way of installing Windows, except provisioning is going to pre-install certain applications or pre-configure certain settings on that computer. This is very useful in a company environment, especially if you've got to do an installation for a lot of people. So if I need to install something onto one of my users or one of my clients' machines, would it be nice if I could install Windows 10 or Windows 11, and once it's installed, this person already has some or all of the applications they need and already has some or all of the configurations they need. If it was a normal traditional installation, you would still have to go and install applications, maybe do some updates, maybe do some configurations and settings, which is not impossible. It's not difficult. It's just inconvenient and time consuming, especially if you have to do this for a lot of people in one go. So provisioning is just going to speed things up and make your life a little bit easier. And then lastly, when it comes to modern methods, it's not the only modern method, but this is at least the last one that's on the Microsoft list, is upgrading through updates. Yep, in case you don't know, you can actually update or upgrade your operating system through Windows updates. I'm not 100% sure exactly when this started, but I knew it was available, or I know it was available with Windows 10. So up until about 2015, 2016, Microsoft Windows 10 was being released as a free update if you're running Windows 8 or Windows 8.1, I believe. Can't remember exactly what the terms and conditions was back then. Now, this was both good and bad. A lot of people didn't want Windows 10, and maybe they left their PC on throughout the night. When they come back to the office the next morning, they would find out, oh, now you've got Windows 10. Not that it's a bad operating system, but a lot of people are stuck in their ways and stuck in their comfort zone. And now you're forcing those folks into Windows 10 situations, which they don't always like. Maybe they were going to switch to Windows 10, but when they were good and ready and when they had time to go and test it out and see how things work. But if you're going to come to work the next morning and you need to go and do some things very quickly and very urgently, and now you have to go and figure out how this new operating system works first, you're not exactly going to be a happy camper now, are you? And that's exactly what happened to a lot of folks, especially if they left their PCs on throughout the night. It was also annoying in a sense of it keep popping up with reminders asking you, would you like to update? Would you like to update? And most people would just say no, no, no. Not because they don't necessarily want it, it's just because at that point in time they might be working and they can't upgrade while they're working. That's just silly. And at some point, this actually, I saw this with my own eyes, there would be no cancellation button or little red cross you can go and click on to say, nope, I don't want this right now. It would kind of force you to go and upgrade, which was very annoying. The good news was, if you did accidentally upgrade, you can go into what's known as the settings app, and in there you had 50 days to go and revert back to the previous operating system, and it would look exactly the same way as that it did look previously. Every program, every setting, everything on the machine would be exactly the way it was. Now, Windows 11 is the same thing, apparently. I'm told, apparently, on Windows 11, you can get this for free if you're running Windows 10. Sounds kind of fishy, right? I mean, why is something for free? And I suspect it's because Windows 11 pretty much integrates with all aspects of your life. So the quicker Microsoft can get Windows 11 onto people's machines, the quicker they can integrate to all aspects of your life, including your shopping and all that, which means they indirectly make money. So somewhere along the line, they're going to be making money, is what we say. Nothing in life is ever for free. So if something is for free, you should go and ask, why? What's the catch? You know that famous saying, what's the catch? So Windows 11 is apparently for free, I'm told, and you can get this for free via an update. It's obviously going to be a huge update, so I would suggest you go and make backups. They say it's not required, but a golden rule in IT is you always make a backup, whether you need it or not, because you never know. Something might just go wrong, and you might be the one out of 1,000 or one out of 1,000,000 situations where something will go wrong. That's normally our luck as IT people. Okay, so a little bit more regarding installation methods for Windows clients. Once again, you can go and do an in-place upgrade, which you guys should have a more or less idea what that is. That obviously means you've got an existing operating system, and assuming you're going to stay on the same architecture and the same edition more or less, you can go and do an upgrade. Unfortunately, you just need to have an existing operating system, and you're going to be stuck on the same machine. No new hardware. You can alternatively go and do a new deployment, which is probably going to be our favorite if it's your own machine at home. Brand spanking new operating system. Everything is squeaky clean. You are unfortunately going to have to install everything manually afterwards. If it's an office environment, this might not be the best method because it normally means there's going to be a lot of work for you afterwards. This user or client's probably going to want all kinds of drivers and updates and programs and settings and features, which is quite frankly annoying to go and give them, but that is what it is. You can go and do a refresh. I'm saying it like that because it is listed as such in this course, which I find strange. This course was released at the end of 2021 or the beginning of 2022. And at that point, refresh has been long gone removed on Windows 10, and yet we still call it refresh. So what they mean by refresh is you're going to go and use something called reset. In the old days, we had refresh and reset. Refresh would basically do like a format in your machine, except it would allow you to keep certain aspects like your files and stuff in your PC. Where reset was kind of like a format, a factory reset. Now you only have reset, but reset is now incorporated the refresh, benefits and all that, where it actually asks you, would you like to keep your files and stuff, or do you just want to go and wipe everything on your machine? So for all intents and purposes, when we say refresh in the exam and in this course, we're actually talking about reset, which is now obviously incorporated refresh. We know what provisioning is. Like we've said earlier, provisioning is when that machine is going to have certain programs already installed already after you've installed Windows. It might have certain settings and configurations applied already. This is a wonderful method to go and use companies, especially if you've got to do a lot of PCs. If you're going to have to go do 10, 100, or 1,000 computers, do you honestly want to go to each of those machines afterwards and go and tweak things and configure things and install things? Heck no! So wouldn't it be nice if you have most of the stuff done already? And yes, you can. It's called provisioning, people. And then, of course, you can do a migration. Now, generally speaking, migration means to move from something old to something new. Something you'll hear more about once we get to that specific topic in that specific module. But for now, migration could be a wipe and load, or it can be a side by side. So what is meant by the first one, wipe and load, is I'm going to go and kind of sort of make an image of my PC as if I'm going to move to another computer. I'm going to back up that image somewhere. It's normally on a server of some sort. It could be an external drive, but it's usually a server. I'm going to back it up or make that image. And once I've done that, I'm going to go and wipe that PC. Basically, just wipe it blank. And then I'm going to go back to that same PC, which is now blank, install Windows, and then restore my own migration image on it. So it kind of seems pointless, doesn't it? So you might as well have just done a format and a backup, in my opinion. You can alternatively go and do a side-by-side migration, which is more going to be worth your while. That normally means you are moving to an actual different physical machine. That's probably going to be a better method and a better reason to go and use migration. Now, one of the main tools that Microsoft uses for migration, not the only, is USMT. Not something you need to know at this point in time yet. So USMT stands for User State Migration Tool. It's actually a toolbox of tools. I, honest to God, don't recommend using that. It's a tool that sucks, in my opinion. But I will discuss it and explain it later in this course nonetheless, because it's going to be a question in your exam. So simply because it's going to be questions in the exam, they're actually going to ask multiple questions about it in the exam. For that reason, and for that reason only, I will discuss it in this course. Other than that, if it was up to me and if it wasn't in the exam, I wouldn't discuss that topic because it sucks, that tool, in my opinion. Okay, and then let's go have a peek at the process of installing the Windows client. In other words, how do we actually go about installing Windows onto a machine? Now, you'll see there's a picture on the screen. It's not much, but if you're wondering how it actually looks when we do the installation, don't worry. We are going to do practical demos in this course of mine. So sooner or later, I'm not sure if it's going to be the next module, we're going to do a lot of demos where I'm going to show you guys how to go and actually install Windows, even though it might sound silly to some of you guys. If you already know how to go and do that, you can obviously just skip that module, or at least skip that section in that module. Remember, there's timestamps in each video, and you can go and view them all by just scrolling down to the video description. They should also be visible in the video itself, but if you go look in the video description down below, you can see pretty much all the topics that's going to be discussed in each video. And if there's something you already know, well, skip that topic. If there's something specific you want to know, well, just go to that specific topic. It's going to save you a tremendous amount of time. If you'd like to go and refreshen up on a certain topic, obviously, once again, go to that specific topic. So for now, I only have this little picture for you guys of the installation. So how you get to this picture is up to you. You can maybe go and push in the disk or the DVD or whatever while you've got an operating system. It's just going to pop up automatically. Or you can go and boot from something bootable, like a DVD or a flash drive or whatever. So if you're going to be booting from something like a flash drive or a DVD or whatever, that's probably because you don't have an existing operating system, or maybe because you want to do a clean installation, which is just referred to as a wipe and load in most cases. Either way, there's going to be an installation button, which looks exactly the same for the most part on Windows 11, Windows 10, 8.1, 8.7, Vista, all the way back to Vista. It looks pretty much exactly the same. The only part that slightly differs between 11, 10, and all these other operating systems is way at the end of the installation when it's actually done, when Windows is actually already running, where it's going to ask you, okay, do you want to send any diagnostic data to Microsoft? What time zone do you want to be in? That basic stuff. What information do you want to send to Microsoft? It's literally right that last few seconds just before you land on the desktop. That's the only part that's really going to differ between installations. And maybe the color background. The one might be blue, the other one might be purple. Other than that, if you've done an installation, anything between Vista and Windows 11, you would see pretty much the exact same steps, same thing. Nothing really has changed over the years. It's going to ask you to install. You're going to choose your language. You're going to go and choose on which hard drives you want to go and install this, which partition or which hard drive you want to install this, what language you want to install it on, all that kinds of jazz. Straightforward stuff, guys. Now, some things you maybe want to go and consider before you just go ahead and randomly install Windows. It sounds pretty straightforward. Well, it is pretty straightforward, I suppose, but still, nonetheless, a few things you need to go and consider is deployment scenario. So basically go and ask yourself, why are you installing the operating system that you're busy installing, especially if you're deploying it via some means to one or more people? What's the situation? Is it for one person? Is it for more than one person? Why are you deploying this? Based on that, you need to make a decision. Also consider things like centralized management. Do you need to, or will you need to be able to manage these devices from a central point? If so, then maybe you should go and consider a certain version of Windows or Edition. Just to suck something out of my thumb here, you might not want to go and use Home Edition because Home Edition doesn't allow you to go and join a domain. And joining pieces to a domain would be one out of many ways for you to manage your devices from a central place. You might want to go and consider drivers that's required. I mean, let's face it, all PCs will need drivers. The question is which ones and why, and then also how do you plan on getting them onto these devices? If it's just one PC, then heck, you know what? You can just go and install the drivers afterwards manually, if need be, if that's what you really want to go and do. But as soon as it becomes more than one person, then you maybe have to go and put in some thought into this. Maybe when you're provisioning your PCs, maybe also include the drivers you need. Why not? Maybe, just maybe, you should go and deploy an image to these PCs instead, which has got everything that they would need on there already. This image includes the programs they need, or at least most of them. It includes the drivers they need, or at least most of them. That's going to make your life drastically a lot quicker and a lot easier when it comes to deploying Windows, especially if it's going to be deploying Windows to a bulk group of people or devices. Go and ask yourself about hardware and storage requirements. What will these people need to be able to do on these PCs? Depending on what they need to do, you might need to go and jack up the hardware. You might need to go and give them more RAM, possibly a better and faster CPU, maybe more storage, or maybe a different kind of storage, faster storage like SSD, maybe a NAS drive, maybe access to some sort of file server, maybe some sort of cloud storage requirements. It all depends on the situation, of course. Go and check connectivity, network connectivity and capacity. Will these users need connectivity to some form of network, where it's just your internal network? If so, is it going to be Ethernet or wireless? Do they need access to the internet? If so, how are they going to get that? Go and ask yourself about operating system features. Will you or these people need certain features? I'm going to thumbsuck it again. This could be something like virtualization, which means you could need Hyper-V. It could be encryption, which means you could possibly need something like BitLocker or a TPM chip. It could be domain, the ability to go and join a domain, which means you need a certain edition. So the list, of course, goes on. How do you plan on doing licensing and activation? Because obviously we need to keep this legal, at least as far as Microsoft's concerned. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. I'm kidding, of course. Of course, we need to keep this legal. So how do you plan on licensing this stuff? Are you going to go and do it manually, one by one? You're going to type it in point into each PC, or you're going to phone Microsoft, or you're going to do like a bulk activation. most medium to large size companies do what we call a bulk activation of some kind. It's much better to go and do it that way. And then lastly, maybe go and ask yourself about applications. What applications will these people need? Maybe you want to consider putting them in a provisioning or putting them in some sort of image instead of having to go and install these applications manually afterwards. I mean, nobody wants to go and do that. Okay, folks, let's maybe move on to the fourth section we had on that agenda list originally. So we're slowly creeping towards the end of this module. Not quite there yet. The fourth section, if you guys remember, was about upgrading and migrating. So obviously this is going to be probably to Windows 10 or 11. Now I'm going to give you guys nice little pictures, well, kind of, for both the upgrading process and the migration process. And then I'll give you guys a little list of benefits and drawbacks for both upgrading and of course migrating. So first up, we have upgrading Windows clients, not migrating, upgrading. So the very first thing you're going to start with is there in the middle, which is evaluating. So you can think of this as a checklist, maybe having a little clipboard. It's not going to be an actual clipboard, of course. And you're going to go and check, does your PC meet the requirements for you to go and upgrade to a newer version of Windows or newer edition of Windows? This could be, hardware requirements. Do you have enough RAM? Is your CPU fast enough? Do you have enough storage? This could potentially also be other random hardware requirements, like do you have a TPM chip if you intend on upgrading to Windows 11? So that's something new now that we have to go and add to our evaluation list, of course. Software wise as well, do you have the right version? So if you're going to be upgrading, do you have the right versions of softwares and all that? Is your software compatible on Windows? Do you have the right drivers for that Windows you're about to go and install? All that kinds of jazz. Now once you've made sure that you meet the requirements, which you're bound to do, then you're going to go and back up, because let's face it, anything can go wrong. So even though Microsoft says they've guaranteed this and they've tested this, nothing will go wrong, you're still going to go and back up, and then you maybe go make another backup just because. So you can never have too many backups. So go and back up. Once you've backed up, then and only then will you go and upgrade. If you're bold enough and you've got absolutely nothing to lose, then you can just skip the backup phase and just go straight to upgrade, but that's very risky behavior. So step 3 is obviously just the upgrade, that's it. Nothing's fancy there. Once you've upgraded, step 4 would be to go and verify if everything is actually working the way it's supposed to. This sounds silly, but let me tell you, I've had many cases where people have upgraded and things do not work. Weird, right? So when these folks did a clean installation, which means they had nothing on the machine, they just wiped and loaded and then installed a clean copy of Windows, everything worked fine. But as soon as they do an upgrade on the exact same machine, certain things do not work. This could be certain features or functions within Windows itself. Sometimes the taskbar doesn't want to work. Sometimes the PC doesn't want to start at the first attempt. You have to sometimes restart it. Sometimes the keyboard doesn't want to work. Sometimes the mouse doesn't want to work. You have to cold start it or warm start it a few times. It's a bit of an annoyance. Sometimes certain programs doesn't want to work, and this includes your antivirus. You sometimes have to go and reinstall them. All kinds of weird, buggy, and glitchy behavior. So you're just going to basically go and verify everything is working to the best of your ability, especially if it's for a user or client. If it's your own PC, you can always go and sort it out as you find the problems. But if it's for a client or a user, oh man, you just know they're going to complain, these guys. I mean, we know how it is. These users will complain about anything they can complain about. So to the best of your ability, go and test as much as you can, but you're bound to miss a few things at least. And then lastly, once you verified everything is working, you're going to go and update the machine. This is going to be your Windows updates, program updates, driver updates, pretty much any updates you can imagine. So that is more or less in a nutshell the process for upgrading your Windows clients. Now here is another picture for you guys. You would notice this one is migrating Windows clients, not upgrading, migrating. So at first glance it looks the same, but if you squint your eyes and look carefully, you'll see this is slightly different. So this time you're first going to go and do a backup. Once again, Microsoft says they've tested this, but we don't trust them. So go and do a backup, install the Windows client, go and update the Windows client like before, install all the applications, and then you go and restore Windows. Now this sounds a bit confusing, so let me give you guys some context. What they've got in mind here is that tool I mentioned earlier, the USMT tool. It stands for User State Migration. It's a whole toolbox of tools. So normally you've got your old PC and your new PC, and there's quite often a third machine involved, which is a server. That's where you're going to store the temporary image of your PC. So on your old PC, you're going to go and back up, which is actually more of making an image, is what we're saying. So you're going to go use this USMT tool, specifically the scan state tool within that package, to go and back up the old PC or make an image of it. You're going to store that someplace temporarily, a third machine like a server. And then you're going to go and install the Windows client. You're going to go and update, and you're going to go and install all the applications on that new machine. So that second step that it says install client, that's going to happen on the new machine. Step 1 backup is on the old machine. Install the Windows client is on the new machine, because that new machine is going to be blank. It's a brand spanking new machine you just took out of the box. There's nothing on it yet. So you're going to go and install whatever version of Windows you want on that machine. You're going to go and update that machine. Once you've updated the machine, you need to go and install all the applications you had on the old machine that you still want on this new machine now. So you're going to have to go and manually reinstall them. I'm saying it like that because it's a tedious process. And once you've got all the applications installed on that new machine now, only then do you go and restore that image you made initially on the old machine. It's a very big inconvenience, and quite frankly, if I'm being honest with you guys, it's going to be quicker and easier if you just go to your old machine, plug in something like an external hard drive, copy paste everything you want to back up to that hard drive, go to your new machine, install Windows, and just copy paste all the old stuff back to the new machine. It sounds like a lot of work, but trust me, that's going to be a lot less work than having to go and use the USMT tool. You would remember earlier I said that tool sucks, because now that tool, what they don't tell you about it is you need to go and download that tool. It doesn't come with Windows by default. You need to go and download it. It's somewhere between 1 gig and 3 gigs in size. Maybe you didn't even have that data. Maybe you don't even have internet for all we know. So now you need to go and download it. You need to put that tool on both the old machine as well as the new machine. And you need a third machine now to temporarily store your image backup. What an annoyance. And when you eventually get to the new machine, you first have to install all the applications first before you can go and restore your old image. Now, why, you might ask? Because if you chose to go and back up the settings and stuff on the old machine, when you go to the new machine, it's going to want to restore those settings on those programs. And it's not going to find those programs, which means the restore part is going to fail. That is why step 4 is to first go and install all the old applications you had, so that when you go and restore, it's able to apply those settings to those programs we spoke of. Okay, so let's get to some of the considerations for choosing between upgrade and migrate. In other words, which one would you gonna go? So we're gonna go and weigh the scales, the benefits and the drawbacks, the advantages and the disadvantages of both of these. So let's first start with in-place upgrade, looking at the advantages and disadvantages. You should see a list in front of you guys right now. And I'm going to do the same thing for migration. So looking at the left, there is of course your advantages. I tried to separate these with 2 different colors to make it easier for you guys to spot the differences. So the list I'm giving you guys is what Microsoft says. These are not my words. These are Microsoft's words. And why I'm choosing Microsoft's words is because that's what the exam is based on. Microsoft based their exam on what the course is about, at least the official course. And they don't care about what facts is. So I will point out what's fake here or what's reality, of course. So the first benefit there is retains user settings, application settings, and files. If you want to go and do an upgrade, yes, that really is a benefit. So you don't have to worry about your settings and applications and all that, because you get to keep those. That really is a benefit. Preserves installed applications. Generally speaking, yes, that really is a benefit. Does not require additional storage space for migration files. Nope, that's true. Affects user productivity minimally and preserves user settings and data. I do not fully agree with the affecting productivity minimally part. It's still going to affect you somewhat. Provides a simpler setup process. Yeah, I suppose. Rollback is available in case of a problem. Yes. So whether you upgrade it voluntarily or whether it upgraded accidentally, whatever the case might be, you've got 30 days to go and revert back. If you're wondering how or where, this is normally found in the settings app. So you're going to go to the little start menu, the little sprocket icon. It looks like a little gear. That's your settings app. And in there somewhere, I can't tell you exactly what it is because Microsoft keeps moving stuff around these days. They can't make up their mind. So in there somewhere, there's going to be a 30-day option that's only there for 30 days. It's going to allow you to revert back to the previous version and no hard feelings. If you take longer than 30 days, you're going to have to do a clean installation. You're going to have to go back up and all that, which is a huge inconvenience, of course. Looking at the disadvantages on the right-hand side, cannot start with standardized reference configurations. Preserved applications may not work correctly after upgrading. That's a very, very good likelihood of that happening. They don't make it sound like a big deal, but trust me, that happens more often than you think. Remnant files or settings may contribute to the performance and security issues. Yep, in more than one way. So if you have any remnant issues on the previous operating system, malware, or anything that's messing around, that's still going to mess around on the new machine. Any issues that you probably had in the past would probably still be there because it's still technically the same machine. Does not allow for addition changes. Nope. So if you've got home, you're still going to be on home. If you've got professional, you're still going to be professional, and so on and so forth. It's only available on supported operating systems, of course, and the computer must meet minimum hard requirements, of course. So that's not really disadvantage, it's just common facts, of course. So let's look, of course, at, so let's look at the migration advantages and disadvantages. So looking here on the left once again, offers the opportunity to clean up existing computers and create more stable and secure desktop environments. Yes, because you're effectively moving from one physical machine to another physical machine in most cases. So this of course means you're going to have the opportunity to go and do a little housekeeping. Allows for installation of any edition because it's kind of a clean installation, isn't it? Remember, one of those steps was to go to the new machine and do an installation of Windows. A clean one, which means you get to choose any operating system you want. How great is that? Provides the opportunity to reconfigure the hardware level settings before installation, and malicious software does not migrate to the new installation. Now, that last benefit I do not agree with. The first three, yes. The fourth one, absolutely not. When you do a migration, remember what did I say? What do we do on your old PC? You're doing a backup, which is basically an image backup. When you do an image backup, especially when you go and back up data, it's going to back up all kinds of things, including malicious software. And when you restore that backup or that image onto the new machine, you are effectively restoring the malware as well. So you're copying that, you backed up the virus is what we're saying. If there was a virus, you would have backed it up as well. And now you're just copy pasting that virus onto the new machine. So that fourth one, I'm putting it there because they might ask you about that in the exam. But in reality, I'm telling you otherwise. In reality, I'm telling you guys that's a false statement. You will back up the virus as well, is what's going to happen. Now, looking at the disadvantages, that should actually have been on the disadvantage side if you think about it. So disadvantages wise, requires the use of migration tools such as USMT, and that sucks, of course. Requires installation or reinstallation of applications, which is a huge inconvenience. They don't make it sound like a big deal, but it's a huge big deal. Requires storage space for your user settings and files to be migrated. That's going to be the third server. They just say requires storage space. It's usually a third server that you're going to need. May impact user productivity. It definitely will. Trust me, it will. Okay, boys and girls, let's go to deployment methods. So previously on the third main section, we had installation methods. And now under the fifth main section, we've got deployment methods. Not installation methods, deployment methods, as you guys can of course see. Two different things, of course. Okay, so first off, deployment generally falls into one of the three ways we see in front of us. It's obviously not limited to just these three, but just generally happens to fall into one of these three categories or one of these three ways. The modern methods refers to transforming the existing operating system. The dynamics methods refers to applying configurations, and the traditional methods replaces the whole operating system. There's obviously no right or wrong here amongst these ways. It's just a matter of which one of these best suits your unique needs and requirements. Now, speaking of unique requirements, we've got the imaging and AutoPilot tools, which are great for just those kinds of situations. Now, the imaging one, in case you guys haven't heard of that, it's not taking a photo with your phone or some sort of camera of some kind. No, but there are some similarities. So this is basically when you've got some sort of computer or device, let's call this your reference computer, and this machine has been preset up in a certain way, the way you want your machines to be in your company, generally speaking. And what you're going to go and do now is you're going to go and do something called imaging of that computer. It's going to take a snapshot of that computer with its operating system, the drivers it currently has installed, the updates it currently has installed, the configurations currently on it, the programs it currently has installed, pretty much everything. It's going to take a snapshot of that. It's going to store that image, which is generally very large in size, somewhere. It's usually on a server somewhere in your company. And then whenever you've got a lot of devices that needs to be provisioned, we're basically in a nutshell, we've got to go and install Windows on them and give them everything they need. Instead of just doing it the old-fashioned way of installing Windows and then manually installing the drivers, updates, and everything else those folks need, why not use these images? So if you go and deploy that image, you can actually go and image a very large quantity of devices all in one go. Could be 10, could be 100. So I do this all the time in companies where I'll go take 100 machines and I will go and image all 100 of them at the exact same time. How many you can go and do depends obviously on your own internal infrastructure. How much load and can they handle. The more machines you do at a given time, obviously the slower your network's going to get. If you've got a very fast network, you can do a lot more machines at any given time. If you've got a slow network, there is ways around that, but we're not going to go into that today. That's of course for a different module. So if I go and image all 100 machines at the same time, once they're done and you go to them, you're going to see not only will they have Windows installed in them like they would normally do, but they would also already have the right drivers, the right updates installed. All the programs that I wanted would also be on there along with the configurations. Now, it might not be perfect, but it's drastically going to be a lot less work than having to do it from scratch. So what we normally go and do is when we get that reference computer, we would go and provision it or configure it in a way that we would basically say it's going to be applicable to everybody in the company, or more or less. Any programs that would be applicable to everybody, we would go and pre-install those. If there's certain programs that only one or two people would need, then we're not going to go and install those because that's going to be silly for everybody to get those programs even though they don't need it. Plus, it's going to make the image bigger. So you're going to go and do research. You're going to go to every department, all the people, and just more or less get a feeling as to what kind of programs these people need. What do they have in common? You're going to go and include that in image. What kind of drivers and updates do these folks need? And you're going to go and include that in image. Pretty much everything these folks have in common, that you're going to go and include the image. So that when you deploy this image, that they at least have that already set up. So that what you need to go and do afterwards is at least minor, is what we're saying. Now, AutoPilot, or Windows AutoPilot as some folks call it, this is a great little tool to go and use to, well, make your work also lighter in the manner of speaking. So when you and your company go and buy devices, they quite often come with Windows pre-installed. The downside to that is this Windows is normally pre-configured according to whatever that manufacturer wants or that shop wants. So they've pre-configured, pre-installed certain softwares, pre-configured certain settings, that kinds of stuff. Now you might not want those programs and those settings and all those doohickeys. So when you go and use Autopilot, it's going to go and reset that Windows, not reinstall it, just reconfigure that Windows 10 or that Windows 11 as if you just installed it. It's going to give you the out of the box experience. So what's meant by that is when you just install Windows 10 or 11, it's going to ask you what language do you want, what time zone do you want, how do you want this, how do you want that, where do you want this, where do you want that. You get to set everything up. And it's going to give you that experience. It's not going to go and reinstall it. It's just going to basically go and reset it, so to speak. It's like a switch that's going to be flipped. It's going to reset it, and you get to go and choose that instead of the shop choosing it for you. It gives you control back, is what we're saying. And you can go and add any applications you want to go and add and whatever, of course. Okay, and then next we're going to be talking about deployment strategies. Now, before I go any further, if any of you guys are still watching the video at this point in time, just for gags, in the comment section down below, just type in something along the lines of cheeseburger or hot dog. Totally random, I know, but that's going to let me know who's actually watching this video all the way up until this point. Just for gags. So anyone that's been watching the video up until this point would know what it's about. If you did not watch the video all the way to this point, then you're going to have no cooking clue what it's about, which is just for fun gags. But on a more serious note, in the comment section down below, you are more than welcome to post any questions about anything that you're struggling in this module or in this course in general. But it is going to make it a little bit easier on me if you go and post the relevant question under the relevant module. So if you've got a question about something in this specific module, then preferably post it obviously on this module. It's going to make my life a little bit easier when it comes to posting your question. Not so much for me, but I think it's going to make it easier on the guys that will be reading these comments. Otherwise, anyone that's going to be reading these comments are going to be very confused as to why you're talking about X, but X was never discussed in this particular module. You're going to confuse those poor folks. So let's not confuse anyone. The only thing that should be confusing them is the cheeseburger comment and the hot dog comment. I can only imagine how much fun we're going to have with that. Anyway, so yeah, guys, please let's have some fun in the comment section. Now, getting back to deployment strategies, we've got three main ones that stands out. So first of all, we've got high touch, we've got low touch, and we have zero touch. Now, you're probably wondering what the heck this is. High touch is something you guys have actually been doing all along. You just didn't know it. High touch is when you deploy or install something like Windows 10, like Windows 11, and you're doing it the old-fashioned way by doing everything manually yourself. So this could be by doing a DVD installation. I don't think anyone still does that anymore. Or a USB stick installation maybe, or whatever. The point here is you're going to go and start the PC. You're going to start the installation. You're going to go click on install, click next, next, next. Choose where you want to install it, what time zone, what language, which hard drive. Everything is getting done by you or whoever is doing this installation. That's high touch. So what's meant by the word high touch me is it requires a high level of interaction from the user doing the installation or deployment, which is probably going to be you. Low touch, you can kind of guess what that one's going to be. At least I think you guys can guess. Maybe as soon as I explain low touch, I think you're going to be able to guess what zero touch is. So low touch means it requires a low level of interaction from the user. Low touch is also sometimes known as light touch. You spell it like light mayonnaise, L-I-T-E. Not like light as in a light bulb. No, light as in L-I-T-E. Weird, I know. So low touch slash light touch is when it is somewhat automated. And to achieve this, we use something called MDT, Microsoft Deployment Toolkit. It's a Microsoft tool that allows you to achieve some level of automation. It's not the only tool. There's many other third-party tools we can go and use, but the exam and the course is not about third-party. Microsoft only concerns themselves about Microsoft products and Microsoft softwares and all that. So you don't have to worry about any third-party software. The exam will only ask you about Microsoft stuff in the Microsoft course, like the MDT. So MDT, Microsoft Deployment Toolkit, is what we use to achieve a low-touch scenario, which means it's somewhat automated. You don't have to do everything yourself. Some of it's going to be automated. Zero touch, you can probably guess what it's about. It is 100% automated, and what we use to achieve that is SCCM, System Central Configuration Manager. Now, ironically, that is the tool we use. It's not just because I'm not just saying that because it's a Microsoft tool and this is a Microsoft course. It really happens to be the tool that most companies use to achieve this goal. It's actually one of the only tools you can use to achieve this goal. So you could have scheduled this installation or deployment like a month ago for all we know. And today you get to the office and you're wondering, what the heck? Why do I have Windows 11? And then they're like, oh, you know what? I scheduled this last month. I forgot about it. Whoops. So that is what's meant by zero touch. Okay, folks, and then slowly creeping towards one of the last topics in the last section, which is deployment tools. Like usual, I want to point out that these are not the only tools. These are just some of the most well-known ones. First up, we've got a tool called DISM, D-I-S-M. Now, this is a command prompt tool, and it's used to service images. So remember those images we spoke of earlier that you used to go and capture. You're going to go use the reference computer. You're going to capture it, store that image somewhere, and you're going to go and deploy it once upon a time. Now, sometimes you don't want to go through the painstaking process of having to go and create an image from scratch. So you can go and use this DISM tool to capture them, deploy them, and service them. I usually use this to manage and service them. So if I want to go and add drivers to an image, or change the drivers, or remove the drivers, I like to do that quite often. DISM is the tool you're going to go and use for that. Another tool you get to disposal is Windows SIM, System Image Manager is what it stands for. So this bad boy is what you're going to go and use to create your unattended installation answer files. Now they love asking about that in the exam. Luckily it's nothing complicated. So the exam, you're going to get a question something along the lines of where they'll give you 4 examples It's a monkey puzzle exam, by the way. And they're going to say, which one of the following is an example of an answer file? So when we talk about answer files, we normally say answer file, or unattended answer file. But in reality, these names for these answer files could be anything. I can call it Banana Town if I want to. What makes it an answer file is the extension behind it and the contents inside of it. So the extension is usually a .xml file. So in the exam, you can ignore the names of these files. Two of them are normally called unattended answer files, and they catch people out of that. Ignore the names, people. You're not going to look at the names. Look at the extensions of those files. Which one of those four has got a .xml file extension? I can guarantee you only one of them in the exam will have that extension. That is your answer. That is your answer file. So, oops, I've just given you guys an answer in the exam. But at least you understand the concept behind it. That's what's important here. It doesn't help you know the answer, but you don't know why that's the answer. Now you know. An answer file's got an XML extension, and it's what the contents are inside of it. And you're probably wondering, okay, what does an answer file do? It's going to allow you to automate the installation. So when you install Windows or deploy Windows, let's say install Windows, there's usually a bunch of questions you've got to answer, like which language do you want, what time zone do you want, which hard drive do you want to install it on. An answer file is going to answer those questions for you, which allows you to achieve some level of automation. It's not just that, you can actually go and pre-configure certain things about Windows so that when it's done installing, certain things will be pre-configured on your Windows the way you like it or the way you want it for your users. So more on that once we actually get to that tool in that specific module. You also have a tool called Windows PE, which is actually one of the oldest tools around. It's a minimal operating system used for Windows deployment. So it's basically a DVD or a CD you're going to be putting into your DVD or CD-ROM. At least that's what it usually is. It's not limited to that. And it's going to allow you to boot from that and then install from somewhere else. Now, Windows does a similar thing when you install Windows. We're not getting to that point yet. So when you install Windows, let's say for argument's sake, from a DVD, old school way. I'm not sure if any of you guys have ever noticed, but Windows restarts about 2 or 3 times. The first restart, or one of the first restarts, is because your PC has just effectively copied a mini version of Windows. So when you boot from the DVD, it's first going to go and copy files. It's just going to tell you, hey, it's copying files. It doesn't tell you what it's copying. Let me tell you what it's copying. It's copying a mini version of Windows onto your hard drive. Then it reboots the computer and boots from the hard drive instead of the DVD. Now, why does it do that? It's running from a mini version of Windows from the hard drive while it uses the full speed of your DVD-ROM now to copy the remaining files of the operating system. If it has to use the full speed of your DVD-ROM to copy files and at the same time run the operating system, it's going to copy a lot slower. So if it's going to run Windows from a hard drive while using the full remaining speed of the DVD-ROM to copy the remaining files, you're going to get a much faster installation. So that's the theory behind it, at least. It's not limited to DVD-ROMs, but at least you understand the concept behind the PE disk. And then, of course, we've got the USMT tool, which is actually a collection of tools. They call it a tool, but let me tell you, it's a collection of tools. And we are going to go into that later on in this course. There's going to be a whole lesson just on the user state migration tool. But effectively, we know what it does. It's used to migrate from one machine to another, from an old machine to a new machine usually. And it allows you to go and copy your settings and your files and all that, assuming you want to keep that. So you get to choose what you want to keep, by the way. All right, folks. So like I said earlier, if you are still watching at this point in time, remember to drop a comment down below saying something along the lines of hot dog or cheeseburger. It's your choice. If you've got any questions, you're more than welcome to ask any questions about the exam, the course, or the module in the comment section down below. All right, guys. So I hope you've learned something. If you have, please give the video a like. It does help promote the video so that more people can see it. It also helps show me that you guys have enjoyed the video, of course. And if you'd like to know when the next module, being module 2, comes out for this course, remember to hit that subscribe button. Otherwise, there's a chance you might miss it. And then lastly, folks, just a special shout out and thank you to the Patreon and PayPal sponsors of this channel. They make it possible for me to make this content. And if you guys want to go and do that too, you can find that information in the video description down below. If you want to go make a donation or sponsor the channel, it's your choice. So a special thank you to those guys. And all right, guys, I believe that is it. I will see you guys all on module 2 of the MD-100 course in Microsoft. All right, guys, have a nice one.
Don't they let me